What is agorism? Why is it important spiritually? And how do we get from here to freedom without the violence? Come on, let's access the agorist records. Welcome to Accessing the Akashic Records. What is agorism? Why is it important spiritually? First off, I'm going to do a quick recap because in the very first episode of this freedom or anarchism trilogy, I discussed how authority is the antithesis of natural law. The only authority is the divine and its laws that come through as principles manifesting in this reality. Other than that, we are the only ones who control ourselves. This is known as sovereignty or self-ownership. Then, in the next episode, I discussed voluntarism, where all human interaction, should actually be voluntary, free of coercion and force. Now, I also discussed how that libertarian philosophy uses first principles of logic to determine the core principle, known as the non-aggression principle. It's also known as the golden rule in spiritual teachings, where the initiation of violence or aggression is never actually justifiable. So violence is to be only used in defense. So this paints us a picture or a model of a free civilized society based on moral principles, not man's laws. Principles are liberating rules for human interaction, whereas laws are methods of enslavement under the guise of benevolence. To think that we can use violence, coercion, and basically immoral aggression to fix humanity's problems of violence, coercion, and immorality is equal to standing in a bucket and expecting to be able to lift yourself up by the friggin' handle. I laid these episodes out in this manner, specifically to reveal what I call rules for no rulers. Number one, live according to natural law, which for humans means decentralized authority, also known as self-governance or self-responsibility or self-control, or all of the above. But also not to allow any centralized authority from presidents, prime ministers, kings, emperors to multinational corporations, basically any monopolies. So to decentralize everything, to stop corruption, understanding objective morality, aka the golden rule or non-aggression principle, being in harmony with nature and with each other. So go back, watch my episodes on natural law and the other anarchism episodes for a more detailed description. Number two, the non-aggression principle, which obviously ties in with number one because it's just another way of labeling the golden rule. Number three is to associate voluntarily, free of violence, aggression and coercion. Yes, also ties in with the other two. However, labeling them separately is a more clear, defined way and a way of elaborating on those concepts. As sadly, people do not really comprehend the golden rule or the non-aggression principle, whatever you choose to call it. So go back, watch my episodes on anarchism and voluntarism before you watch this one, so it all makes sense. Also watch the natural law episodes too. So what is a logical progression to get us from where we are currently in crony corporatism to this model of moral self-governance and voluntary interaction, which we can call anarchy or freedom? Well, enter agorism. The term agora comes from the ancient Greek city of Athens. It was a place of open minds interacting for the benefit of all. sharing philosophy, education, free trade of goods and services, plus much more, all done voluntarily, peer-to-peer, without any state molestation, violence, or taxation. So how does that actually translate to the Agorist philosophy that we know in the freedom movement? Well, Agorism is the radical left libertarian theory with counter-economic practice, whereas the main creator of the philosophy, Samuel Edward Konkin III, put it, Agorism is revolutionary market anarchism, the consistent integration of libertarian theory with counter-economic practice. So the libertarian theory, left libertarian theory, he liked to specify as it's actually leftist, with counter-economic practice. So there's the theory and practice side. So what we're going to go into more so in this episode is actually the practice, the practical side. So an agorist is one who acts consistently in freedom for freedom, as SEK3, which is his name abbreviated, likes to put it. Now, from approximately 1972 to 74, SEK formed the theory from the existing libertarian philosophy, adding in Austrian economics and a counter-economics component to create agorism. Basically, Austrian economics sees the market in a more natural way, where the individuals have a subjective value for things that actually fluctuates. So Austrian economics also holds liberty within the market as paramount, as opposed to state intervention and state crony corporatism as we currently have, where mainstream economists on the other end of the spectrum see the market as a more collective and robotic machine that must be restrained by the state. So while agorism uses the laissez, faire, free market counter-economics, or what some may call market anarchism, to bring about a peaceful revolution, it also holds the left-wing ideology of social progressivism, social equality, and that side of things. And also holds a variant of the Marxist class theory with a slightly different take on it, or perspective, where Marx sees a proletariat or bourgeoisie, agorism sees a plunderer ruling class and a plundered slave class. So just slight variation. In a free market anarchist society, law and security would be provided by actual market actors instead of political institutions. So agorists recognise that situation cannot develop through political reform, what SEK3 calls partyarchy, which American libertarians are taking part in by acting within the political arena. So agorists say instead it will actually arise, as a result of market processes. As the state is actually banditry, revolution culminates in the suppression of the criminal state by market providers of security and law. Market demand for such service providers is what will lead to their emergence. Development of that demand will come from economic growth in the sector of the economy that explicitly shuns state involvement and thus cannot turn to the state in its role as a monopoly provider of security and law. That sector of the economy is known as the counter-economy, the black and grey markets. Black markets are what is actually deemed illegal by the state, such as guns and drugs, but also includes potentially life-saving medications and many other things that the state has banned due to regulatory bodies being captured by industries and corporate monopolies, such as lobbyists, people paying politicians off to create arbitrary monopoly laws and all kinds of ridiculous market constraining regulations. So the grey market is not necessarily illegal according to the state, but it's avoiding the state's molestation and taxation. For example, things like farmers markets, flea markets, and basically any peer-to-peer transaction that has no state interference. So this is the main area for agorist action. Red market is where death and murder are involved, such as murder for hire and theft and slavery that is profitable. Pink market is war, taxation, imprisonment, forced institutions, for example, military-industrial complex, prison, industrial complex system, healthcare systems even. Central banking is obviously the biggest one ever. Then lastly, the white market. So that's basically anything that is state tax regulated, from goods and produce to employment and services. So for agorists, the red, pink and white markets are not to be participated in, or at least if you must participate in, say, the white market, it's balanced by equal or higher amount of participation within the black and grey markets. So this is how the colours of the black and grey became the agorist flag. Black meaning anarchy and stateless and without rulers, and grey because that's the main marketplace for freedom to manifest. And the A3 stands for Agora, anarchy, action. So what are some counter-economic methods? Blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies. Why? Because they are decentralized and rely on the integrity of the nodes, or miners to authorize transactions, and that's how the miners get paid, and it's all there in a blockchain ledger. So the whole process cannot be controlled or censored by anyone in particular, as the transactions are overseen by everyone on the blockchain. It's essentially anarchy in action. No authority, no centralization, no potential for monopolization, unless you create a whole new blockchain controlled by, say, an industry or something along those lines. It's exclusive, in which case do not participate in it. It's not what it's about. So this has so many avenues for producing freedom in society that it's literally mind-blowing. We will be able to essentially have our pay streamed like the internet to our wallets as we work through the day. For example, say you work in a restaurant. Each meal that is actually sold has percentages already calculated to cover all the costs of, say, energy, produce, labour, any other factors, the foods, all that. So as the sale is made, it is divided and sent exactly where it needs to go. So everyone is not an employee, but a sole trader. Yes, even the person who actually built the restaurant and runs it cannot say they actually have employees, as they don't actually pay anyone. It all comes directly from the diners or the customers. This is exactly what laissez faire or free market anarchism is. Obviously, the opposite is what we currently have with centralized control of fiat currency by centralized central banks and state taxes on every sale. Every product, everyone's income, all state controlled right from the inception of the money through to every dollar spent along the way. This is why centralization and globalization is the antithesis of freedom, because it takes control of the individuals out of the individual's hands and puts it into the very few. Don't have to look hard in the world today and see what is being termed globalists, who are painting globalism as a benevolent venture for the greater good of everyone, with sayings such as global problems require global solutions, so we need global governance. This is the idea we need one government to dictate to every country how to operate, and that should be ringing alarm bells off in even the most trusting of status mind, let alone those of us who understand the massive contradiction in the centralization of authority to freedom. So another great method of counter-economics is permaculture and being self-sustainable. It not only takes a huge portion of taxation from the state, it also releases you from the dependence of the controlled grid of energy and food. A very popular one now is ride shares like Uber and Ola. This was actually illegal or black market when it began, yet it was forced. It actually forced government to change their regulations to allow it due to public pressure, and well, basically just because they could not, in fact, police it. It was too much of a logistic nightmare, so they just had to concede. This direct action of disobedience is how we actually enact peaceful revolution in other areas. So as you can see, agorism is a way to remove the immorality of violence, aggression and coercion from the market, which is essentially in place because of the state, and we can replace it with peaceful, moral, voluntary exchange. So if you hold the same philosophy within social interactions and follow this path through to its logical conclusion, we essentially arrive back at the Agora, a true peaceful revolution. To find out more, please check out the links below in the description box and join what's called freedomcells.org to start up, or join a group that's actually participating in these actions in your area. So these essentially people who are working towards this goal that I've just laid out for you. Next episode is going to be a mini episode on a sort of addendum to this series to help people understand how humanity can actually bridge the gap and remedy the flaws of communism and capitalism and property rights. In my episode on mutualism. Mutualism's the first ever anarchist philosophy, which I realise in hindsight in making the trilogy, excuse me, should have put it in there somewhere, but it's alright, I'll make it a sort of addendum mini episode, because no anarchism series would actually be complete without it, so it was just a bit of lack of foresight. I hope you learned something new in this episode and have some great ideas to implement in your life and assist moving humanity towards freedom. So thanks for watching, everyone. Much love to you all. Please share, hit like and subscribe to help me out. Namaste.